We have today Ishita Iyer, who is a psychotherapist and clinical hypnotherapist for almost a decade. She is also a certified and trained transactional analyst with a diploma in Indian naturopathy medicine and with training in certain traditional Chinese medicinal techniques such as cupping therapy and acupuncture. She has successfully aided countless individuals overcome various challenges in their journey towards mental and emotional well-being, whether it's relationship, body image, anxiety. She's also the health awareness instructor and counselor at the Aditya Jyoth Eye Hospital in Mumbai. There she works with high trauma patients and assists them to come to a stage of grounding and acceptance with their often irreversible eye conditions. Being passionate about health, that's mental, emotional, spiritual, and physical, Ishita actively works towards causes such as suicide prevention, menstrual health, and feminine hygiene, and has spoken on various platforms. She is a TEDx Gateway Unplugged speaker and is currently in the process of building a product based health and wellness brand, Mooldhara. Welcome to the show, Ishita.
Thank you so much, Premrat sir and Deepak sir, for such a beautiful and warm welcome. As I said earlier, it just feels like home to be amongst all of you. Such amazing, amazing people, such kind people. I'm just really humbled to be here.
Thank you. Thank you. That's very flattering. So let's start with the first question. What all does mental health comprise of?
So, Premrat ji, often and actually in the past, I would say 3 to 4 years, we've been hearing this term mental health a lot, especially across social media platforms, and because a lot of people are bringing about a lot of awareness. Some people are aware about it, some people are not. I want to make it very simple so people are able to understand the simplicity of it at this point. I want to define what WHO, the World Health Organization, defines mental health as first. So they say it's a state of well-being in which the individual realizes his or her own abilities, can cope with the normal stresses of life, can work productively and fruitfully, and is able to make a contribution to his or her community. Mental health includes our emotional, psychological, and social well being, and it also impacts how we think, how we feel, how we act, and how we decide. Now, for some, mental health means enjoying open and honest communication with their family members. For some, it could be getting involved in causes or businesses that they're passionate about. Which brings me to a very important point. Mental health for me can be different from the mental health someone else has. The definition of that can be different because we all think, feel, respond differently to different situations. Personally, for me, mental health comprises of psychological, as in thoughts, emotional, the way I feel, physical. Now, physical health is very important for mental health as well because this includes our nutrition, this includes healthy eating and at the right time. This includes good gut health. This includes having good sunlight, good sleep, good hydration, good exercise, and taking medication, no matter what kind you're taking, when needed. And then spiritual, when all these needs are met.
Good. Thanks for that explanation. So you have set the ground rules as to what mental health comprise of with the WHO definitions. So taking it forward now, you have worked in Gambia for over 15 years, interacting with people from 40 odd nationalities. How different are issues you had to tackle in Africa, different from the ones that we have in India?
So, if you allow me to make a small correction, Gambia is in the northern side of Africa. I was in Zambia, which is
The
close to
Zambia.
Zimbabwe. Yes, and I was raised there. I lived half of my life there. And I want to share a backstory here. I was actually studying something known as CIMA, which is CIMA. It is said it is the ICWA equivalent in India. And that was when I started dealing with a lot of emotional and mental health issues. There were a lot of things happening, and if I be open and vulnerable enough, lot of dysfunctional in familial issues that led to me having a lot of psychosomatic issues, and that actually led me to question the why, the how, because I was at a stage where I was pushed and forced to take certain decisions at the tender age of 17, 18, which required me to be emotionally resilient. And that's when my exploration began, that there is something known as the mind is a very important aspect on how I'm going to deal with things. It was only when I came back to India and after I lost my father to cancer, that I realized that what, I actually want to re-educate myself. I took the trouble of studying my 12th again, where I took psychology as a subject, and then I went on to educate myself with a degree in psychology. So coming back to the various differences in mental health, or just scenarios in a country like in a underdeveloped country like Zambia and in India, because I do work with people from there now. See, India as a community has certain issues that they deal with that impacts their mental and their emotional health. Now, we have a lot of, if I may use the word casteism, that, and communities that we belong to, that each have their own belief systems that are passed down through generations, right? And each of them impact the person on a different level. A country like Zambia, the primary challenges are addiction to drugs, addiction to alcohol. AIDS is a big problem, and so dealing with those kind of issues, and often those are life and death issues, because a large portion of people in a country like Africa are just basically trying to survive, right? And so everything for them is like a live or die situation, which may not always be the case here. And early deaths is also a big problem in Africa. Like the average, life expectancy is 35 to max 40 years. So, then the emotional challenges of those. So if something like this happens in a country like India, people will be really shocked. Whereas a country like a country like Zambia and Africa, it's normal. Oh, he died of AIDS. Oh, he died in a road accident. It's said very casually. Whereas in India, it would be a little difficult. So this is just a little bit on how certain things can differ. Mental health differs from country to country as well, because as I mentioned, they have their own interpersonal challenges that have been passed on through generations.
Thank you. That's quite a journey that you have had. And it's quite shocking to know the life expectancy in Africa is just 37 to 40, while in India we are in the 78,
Yeah,
78 to 80. So we should feel ourselves to be much more privileged.
absolutely. Grateful for
Yeah.
where we are today.
How do we emotionally navigate ourselves through difficult relationships during this pandemic? Please share some success stories of how you would have helped people navigate through this tricky phase.
So, relationships, discussions on relationships have always been, a cause of attention and attraction for a lot of people. However, what the pandemic has forced almost everyone to do is face and deal with situations that they earlier tried to escape in various ways, right? Because most of us were probably traveling out, even if we were working from home for some reason, we were still stepping out for, let's say, seminars, or, we were going out for a coffee or anything. um, that has stopped. That also means that a lot of people who have not dealt with their own mental health and their own issues have ended up projecting it and bringing it into the relationship that they earlier used to stay away from, right? And a lot, there's been a lot of report of rise in domestic violence, especially in India since last year. There's been a rise in divorces in certain countries as well. Why? Because they've realized that the person that they have probably, or the environment that they chose to, let's say, live in, was not done in a healthy way. Now, in the course of the pandemic, the maximum number of people that I've worked with have come with relationship issues. And I'll share one example here. A young married couple, not in India, I would not like to name the country as well. Until the pandemic struck, they were in like that honeymoon phase of their marriage, and they were it was all good because they were spending time outside as well. They were spending time traveling, and not dealing with serious issues, if I should use the word, which is how sometimes we um, gaslight ourselves with as well. And when this lady approached me with let's say, um, her having a lot of issues with her mother-in-law, her having a lot of issues with her husband, she realized that she had a lot of unfulfilled needs that were not met in her childhood, that she was expecting subconsciously somewhere to be fulfilled by her husband and probably her mother-in-law as well, which she did not realize until she was constantly brought at a point where she just had to deal with it. And it took her a good 6 months to unlearn what she had, as a child. It took her the realization that I probably have to forgive my parents for not being the parents I wanted them to be, and I don't need to carry her belief systems into my marriage. Just because my parents didn't have a very great marriage does not mean I cannot have a good marriage as well. So it took her that a little bit of time. It took her to understand that in certain situations we can also be toxic. In certain situations we also need to work on ourselves. It may not always be the opposite person. It's not about compromise. It's about understanding what our triggers are, and probably keeping something like separation probably as the last thing that we can think of. Definitely, I also think that if a marriage is extremely toxic, if a relationship is extremely toxic, then you need to think of how to draw your boundaries. And sometimes in some situations, boundaries and healing can come from temporary or maybe permanent separation. However, it depends from case to case. It doesn't, what applies to one person may not apply to everyone else as well. So this was just one case. And, there are various other, issues. Another prominent issue is, relationships between parents and children, because again there has been conflict that they have been brought in front of, and both of them really don't know how to deal with. So the parent expects the child to be in a certain way, the child is expecting the parent to be in a certain way. That's leading to a lot of stress. So again, I think the bottom line is understanding that everyone is somewhere. This is something that I read in a Louis Hay book. Everyone is a victim of a victim. Sometimes we really hold ourselves and other people crippled with punishment because we're not able to let go. However, the pandemic has really taught us to look at ourselves first, prioritize our needs, work on loving ourselves, and then fulfilling ourselves, and then expecting the same from others. So this was just a highlight of some case that I have been working on. And I would like to, I think someone mentioned that, Smriti Rani ji just mentioned that that was a fake report. I was not, aware of it. So thank you for letting me know.
Thank you for sharing this. So we know now our friend COVID is hitting us in more ways than one, and it is for us to ensure that the relationships that we have, we need to cherish those relationships and maintain it. You talked about parent-child relationship. I've got a friend of mine who works in this a child care center wherein those distress calls comes in. He was also saying there are a lot of new cases that are coming up wherein child abuse in families have
Yeah.
increased to a substantial amount. So now, how do we stay emotionally resilient and motivated in life?
All right. So, what exactly is emotional resilience? I want to start by defining that. So, emotional resilience is our ability to respond to stressful or unexpected situations and crises, right? And the amount of emotional resilience you have is determined by a lot of things. It, by your age, by your identity, and also by what you have experienced in life. Right now, another thing I want to share about motivation is I think sometimes we gaslight ourselves or others by expecting everyone to be motivated all the time. That's not going to be possible. And I think that is sometimes important for us to kind of come out of that slump that, you know what, hey, it's okay for me to feel low. It's okay for me to feel not motivated enough. It's okay for me to feel down. This is not going to, this too shall pass. I can overcome this, right? Because what happens is when we allow ourselves to feel what we are, when we allow ourselves to sit with ourselves, and that this again goes back to, the previous question on relationships. Until we have also not dealt with our own uncomfortable emotions, our own uncomfortable, issues, we will not be able to deal with conflict in other, relationships well enough. So it's very important that you sit with yourself without judging yourself. Why am I angry? I should not be angry in such a situation. No. Are you feeling anger? Yes, I am feeling anger. Now, what do I do? Embrace what you feel, right? Engaging in self care. Now, this is a huge problem in a lot of people, and I think I have seen this pattern in the cases that I've dealt with Asian women, not just Indian, with Asian women. Because generations through generations, we have been taught that we should, do for others without thinking of ourselves. That is not service. That is like pouring from an empty cup. How are you going to give someone else when you don't have it yourself? It can be love, it can be understanding, it can be respect. So again, COVID has taught us important to take care of yourself first. If you, let's say you have COVID and you go around, you will probably infect others. Same with self-care. Give yourself first what you're expecting others to give you or what you want to give others. Otherwise, you will burn out. Right? So engaging in self-care to stay motivated um, for a good amount of time is possible. Um, Allow yourself time to get over certain situations and certain things in life. Instant gratification doesn't work, and we live in a world of instant gratification with social media right now. And I see a lot of people, trying to, okay, you know what, this is, I had a fight with my boss, and I've always had fights with my boss as a pattern in such situations, right? So when you've recognized that, when you're trying to sit with it, and you realize that certain tendencies of yours have come from a pattern in childhood, give yourself time to unlearn those patterns and make those new changes. And it's not going to be an easy road. You will have times when you will feel absolutely, demotivated. You will feel absolutely not good enough, and that's okay, right? Give yourself, I often tell people, give yourself 24 hours to feel bad. Are you feeling bad? Are you feeling low? Give yourself 24 hours. But after 24 hours, ask yourself, what do I do now that can make me feel better? So what you've done is you've dealt with it. You have not, judged yourself for feeling angry, bad, low, or whatever. At the same time, because you've dealt with it effectively, you're able to, think of a solution towards it. So, and lastly, I think I'm sure a lot of people here are already doing that. Make time for gratitude. Now, gratitude lists and journals not necessarily have to be huge achievements. If today you have felt really low, yet you have made the attempt to come to this webinar, or you've just gotten through the day, you've managed to make tea for yourself, be grateful for that as well. It's actually these small things what we acknowledge and reward ourselves for that help us stay motivated when something goes down in our lives. And this is something that needs to be done as a practice when things are not going wrong. It's not that something is some there's an event or situation, let me start working on myself now. No, it has to be done consistently, because we don't know what can happen next. So yeah.
Beautifully explained. Beautifully explained. The need for introspection. You need to look inwards, maintain a gratitude journal wherein you can introspect and do a lot of things. Thanks for sharing that.
Okay.
Ishita, as a young woman, you have been doing human service to humanity. What is it that drives or motivates you in this thankless task?
Thankless is the right word. um, I think for me, it has been my journey. And, some of you might have heard me share it at the Unplugged by TEDx event as well. I dealt with a lot of difficulties at a very young age, but that made me realize while I was working with myself, of course, I took professional help. I tried to keep myself abreast with whatever I could in whatever way to stay emotionally independent and not dependent on anything. I think for me, it has been the fact that, my journey has led me to, I think, give hope to others. And it is not, I've taken time to understand that it has not come from a place of my need to help others. I don't rely on, gratification or gratitude from others for the fact that I change someone's life. I don't do that, right? My job is that of a medium. If I'm able to, trigger change in a healthy way, I would not like to use the word positive, in someone's life, I think that is my work done. And what really motivates me is when someone does not need to take my services anymore. Because for me, that I feel is a job well done by me. Also, I think we have a long way to go as, as Indians, when it comes to embracing something known as mental health. Right? Because as I mentioned earlier, mental health is not just about thinking good or feeling good or thinking positive. It's not just about positive affirmations. There are a lot of things that need to be done, and there's a lot of work that needs to be done. And so I think that has kept me motivated. And I think what recently has really made me motivated and kept me going is, I've actually learned a lot of things from animals. I've learned a lot of things from my dog. I keep sharing that, my dog is my biggest teacher, because I've learned unconditional love. I've learned unconditional forgiveness. I've learned unconditional support from, from this animal. And that just, with minimum amount of, motivation. So I think that, coupled with my journey, has really helped me keep going. And lastly, I just believe in the goodness of humanity. Yes, there's a lot of bad things happening in the world. Yes, there's wars, there's every kind of, you name it, political issues, you name it, but there is equal amount of good in the world. And I think if we focus on that, we will be able to kind of push ourselves to think of what more beauty can we add, and how much more value we can add to the lives of others.
Great, noble thoughts coming from someone so young. We are privileged to have you in our midst.
Thank
And
you.
talking about your dog, it's time, with all the positive things that the dog is doing, it's time to change the English phrase, it's a dog's world, the negative connotation that goes with it's a dog's world. You mentioned you have been a TED speaker. What was the idea that you shared in your TED talk?
So my talk was titled "The Emotional Addiction to Pain and Suffering." And so we all know that addiction is the inability to stop consuming a substance or engaging in an activity that causes harm. And when we say addiction, the first thing that comes to us is smoking, alcohol, drugs. Scientifically speaking, every emotion that we have, whether positive or negative, is actually a blend of certain neurotransmitters or chemicals and hormones that our brain instantly produces in response to our thoughts. Again, I highlight the fact, because of this, mental health is not just all in our head. There's a biological process for it, right? So this cocktail of chemicals then circulates throughout the body, producing corresponding sensations that are felt at both the physical and the psychological level. For example, when someone is very anxious, they may start sweating, some people start trembling. Everyone has different reactions to how, we process, the stress. Now, the truth is, suffering and struggle for a lot of people, I'm not saying all, is also an emotional addiction, as strong as those to alcohol and drugs. The only difference is that these are created by our internal emotional states rather than external substances introduced to the body. For example, I've seen a lot of people, I hear from a lot of people, the fact that there is no stress in their lives actually gives them more stress. Why is something not going wrong? Because they've been in that environment of constantly firefighting. They've been in very stressful environments, and sometimes they end up sabotaging a peaceful environment because the brain doesn't feel safe enough to be in that way, right? We don't even realize that our mind, body, and soul are really suffering, and that is why peace and serenity can seem very alien to a lot of people. There's also another example that I would like to give. There are cases of people becoming very weirdly attached to the person who inflicts pain on them, and this syndrome has a name. It's known as the Stockholm syndrome, right? If you Google it, you'll hear the history of it.
Yeah, about prisoners, not
Yes,
that
actually, yeah.
hostage crisis, wherein,
She
yeah,
fell in love with the person who
one,
held her
yeah,
hostage,
hmm.
right? So if you take a moment and think of it, we are actually not addicted to substances or activities, but we are actually addicted to escaping our own realities, right? Whether it's drug abuse or self harm, or these are all very complex topics. These are all symptoms of addictions, and bigger issues are not the cause. Addiction is not the cause is something else. It usually stems from a childhood filled with unavailable parents that they may not know that they were themselves. Not saying that parents are bad, but they may not have had the awareness and education that probably people today have. Trauma and the obvious chain of events that follow it.
And I'm very sure with this, your TED talk will go viral, and there will be lots and lots of views. You also need to go and have a look at it.
Right.
We are having an interesting discussion with this young lady. I'm sure the participants will have a lot of questions. If you all have any questions, please put it on the chat. We will take some questions at the end. My last question to you, Ishita, before I hand over the proceedings to my co-host Deepak. How do we de-addict ourselves emotionally?
All right. So, again, I want to explain this in a slightly, scientific way. If you allow me to share a small, PPT that I made. Yes, Neeta ma'am, dysfunctional family also contributes in a major way, and this is something that runs through generations. Again, highlighting the fact that people are not bad. People don't, sometimes they don't do it intentionally. It's just the behavior mechanisms and learnings that we have had and seen generations through generations that actually makes us unconsciously behave this way sometimes. So this, I found this beautiful picture of what I mean when I say emotional addiction to pain and suffering. Being jailed and chained by our own thoughts and belief systems that may not be serving us. Now, again, I want to add something here. It's not necessarily wrong or bad that we had those kind of thoughts or belief systems. It's just that at that point in time, for whatever traumatic incident that happened or whatever emotional incident that happened, that is the best way we knew how to cope and deal with it. And what we knew how to cope with then may not necessarily be healthy or applicable now. And that is why we need to de addict ourselves emotionally, if I may use the word. So I just want to share what happens. Um, just give me a minute. Yeah. So these are certain neurochemicals involved. We are aware of dopamine, we are aware of serotonin, endorphins. These are very commonly used. Another thing, another pattern with people we find who can be emotionally addicted, there are certain catastrophic words that they constantly use, right? That is also a sign that maybe I am or someone else is probably addicted to that emotion or that behavior. So this is how we actually keep the pattern of addiction alive. There's an emotional trigger that we have, and there's a craving that leads to a craving, right? So the brain subconsciously starts screening the environment, seeking validation for the emotional trigger, that is the need to get a kick, right? That leads to emotional uneasiness, which leads to physical uneasiness. Hormones and neurotransmitters are released here, leading to a shift in the nervous system. That then leads to feeling worse with aggravation of symptoms. So let's say, the physical symptoms and reactions to stress starts showing up. That leads to guilt of not being good enough, for example, and need to escape that situation. So not feeling good enough is actually the example that I've taken here, and not feeling good enough sometimes can lead someone to feel not easy in the stomach, or they may have the breathing may change. And what is that happens? They have a need to escape the situation either mentally or physically from that person. That escape then gives them instant relief temporarily because they've not dealt with it. Running away from it feels much more easier. The fight or flight mechanism that we speak about, this is what happens. After that, after they've settled down, they start feeling guilty of escaping and being stress-free, abuse-free, and happy. I do get a lot of people asking me that they're feeling really guilty of escaping a toxic marriage or escaping a toxic environment because they feel like they have left the other person to deal with it on their own. I'll give you an example here. A very senior doctor, was actually working with a very senior doctor again, who had very deep narcissistic behaviors. Right. So now this person stepped down from the organization. As soon as she stepped down, she started feeling so guilty about it, started feeling worse about it. She started feeling really bad about it because she left the other person to deal with things on their own, and the other person is not even aware of what's happening, right? Um, we then keep talking about it by repeatedly venting without relief and reasoning. People will keep talking about it. You give them a solution. Another example here is, I actually had a maid whose husband used to beat her up a lot, get drunk, beat her up a lot. And both me and my mom sat her down and said, why don't you think of, staying away for a while? She said, no, I can't stay away, because he hits me. That's a sign of love for me. मुझे प्यार तो करता है इसलिए मारता है. So there's no distinction between abuse and love, or there's no distinction between that toxic addictive pattern that we have become subconsciously addictive, and what freedom is, what peace is. Yet she would come home and complain about her husband every day, right? So when we keep talking about it, then somatic charges are released and generated in the body. Then you enter the pattern again, and you feel safe about being that way because a void is filled. Why are we not able to break free from a lot of situations or a lot of things? It's because we just feel safe in that situation. There's a term for this: comfort in the chaos. But is it really healthy? No, not necessarily. So, how do we change this? And this is something that I think everyone, would like to know. And this is something that needs to be done consistently, right? Step one here is working on your nutrition and involving a physical exercise. Get help of your doctor if necessary. Get help of a nutritionist if necessary. Trust me, it is futile if you're doing all sorts of mental, emotional, spiritual work without involving the body. Studies confirm that 80% of serotonin is made in our gut. Serotonin is a happiness hormone, right? Which is the inner lining of our intestine. And the gut is also known as the second brain. We use the term gut feeling. I have a gut feeling, right? The gut and brain are constantly communicating with each other. So food becomes the greatest source of therapy for a healthy brain and an overall health. A leaky gut, that is deficient of, let's say your probiotics, prebiotics, enzymes, and a lot of other things can cause a lot of havoc for the mind and body. And that is why, one of the key things that I do when someone approaches me is I ask them if they have any underlying physical health conditions, lifestyle disorders, if that has manifested as a result of their worked on stress, or vice versa. And I'm talking about conditions like thyroid. I'm talking about lifestyle conditions like, type 2 diabetes. Women today are really struggling with PCOD, PCOS, fibroids, and the like. They do come with a lot of mental health conditions and issues such as anxiety for various things, right? Because there's that hormonal imbalance. When you're working on a new habit, remember it is of utmost importance to give the brain proper nutrition to support the process. And this may involve eliminating certain things such as processed foods, sugar, etc., and nourishing them with more healthier options. And again, this is what COVID has taught us. COVID has asked us to go back inwards, right? And just go back to simplicity. um, Make sure your essential vitamins and minerals are regularly monitored and have been given to the body. I'm talking about things like vitamin D3, magnesium, B12, zinc, selenium, calcium, omega, fatty acids, to name just a few. I've seen in so many cases, supplementation of vitamin D3 and B12 have reduced the anxiety episodes to a significant extent. And there are studies that confirm it. It's all over the internet if you want to see. Lack of these essential vitamins and minerals do impact the way we think, decide, and feel. They lead to fatigue. They lead to a lot of confusion. So this is actually very important. On a personal level, the right nutrition and basic yoga single-handed helped me change my entire mindset before I even step to do emotional work, right? Our body has an intelligence of its own, but we have to make an effort to create an environment for that. You cannot plant a seed in a nutrient depleted soil and expect a luscious plant to crop up. In other words, you cannot treat your body like crap and expect it to automatically heal itself emotionally through everything. Now, emotional addiction, uh, you know, um, you need to process your emotions by recognizing them in order to resolve and release the need to hold on to them. See, we often don't hold on to patterns unless they're benefiting us in some way, even if it feels the benefit is, something that we don't consciously do. It could absolutely be subconscious. Bring closure to anything that is not serving you and repeat it until it ceases to shape you up. We can see trauma may not be our fault. What we may have gone through may not be our fault. But dealing with it, overcoming it is absolutely our responsibility. We absolutely have to take 100% emotional responsibility for ourselves because there's no psychiatric medication, there's no supplement that will help you do that for you, right? You can't erase a memory or a traumatic memory from your mind. That's not going to be possible. All you can do is remove the emotional charge around it. You can really use multiple modalities all you like. I'm aware Payal has, Payal ji has done, I think, gestalt therapy, which is very, very good. You can dance, you can meditate, you can write, do what works for you, right? And if something has helped, let's say if Reiki has helped someone, fair enough. But if something more cognitive, like cognitive behavioral exercises, has helped you, take that up. The key is, I repeat, the key here is recognize, resolve, release. You can't skip the process. It is not about being positive all the time, and it's absolutely okay to have anxious thoughts. It's absolutely okay to feel low. It makes us human. It does not make us negative. Draw boundaries, and this is something that's very important for our own mental and emotional health. Now, when I say draw boundaries, doesn't mean we cut people off. When we draw boundaries, we actually do that so that we can maintain a healthy relationship with someone, right? Which just means that if, let's say, someone is constantly talking, let's say constantly gossiping, you just tell that person, hey, you know what, I don't think I want to invest my time and energy in talking like this. Please let me know when we're going to do something else. I would love to be a part of it. Saying no and feeling safe to say no is very important, and not pleasing, not resorting to people pleasing behaviors. Don't feel guilty about having boundaries as well, because I think that's where a lot of people struggle. Change of associations lower stress levels, and they can help you have a growth mindset. Transformation occurs when you have new connections and when you make the effort to build new connections constantly and not suppress it, right? And this is something I believe in truly. There's a wise man who once said that your life is a reflection of the sum total of 5 people you choose to associate yourself with. So choose those 5 people very, very cautiously. They will literally make or break your life. And my father used to say this, my late father used to say this: tell me who your friends are and I'll tell you who you are.
Mhm.
And I realized that 20 years later. Until then, I honestly did not realize. So, remember lastly that your brain is neuroplastic in nature, which means that it can create new pathways based on conscious behavior at any time during your life. Unless you are at a certain age, you have certain neurological conditions, and medically there's probably something wrong. It ideally takes about 21 days, as we all know, for a new neural pathway to form. You will have to keep in mind that overcoming any addiction, even if it's emotional, is not an overnight process. People sometimes don't see immediate results, or they see results for a certain time and they fall back. It's, you're trying to unlearn a lifetime of patterns. Give yourself some patience and time, right? It may take days, it may take weeks, or it may take months to break that old habit and create new synaptic connections in your brain. So persist, and reward is worth it. And lastly, reward yourself if you've broken even one thing. Let's say you have not been able to say no to someone who pulls you down, but you did manage to do it. Reward yourself. That is motivation for the brain. So that's how I would answer this question that you asked me.
One wonderful explanation. We are enthralled by that, and we love when you say You're the average of five people closest to you. That's well said. Now I hand it over to Deepak to take it forward. Deepak, please.
That was a really long answer to a really short question, but good that you gave it. You explained it so well, so beautifully that it's very, very important. It's a whole package deal. It's not that you go to a psychotherapist today, he or she advises you something, and tomorrow you are back to work, you're back to normal. By the way, Ishita, I have always wanted to get the answer to this question. Why is the P silent in psychotherapist?
I don't know, honestly. If I give you the right answer, honestly, I don't know.
The real question was, what is the difference between a psychotherapist, a psychologist, and a psychiatrist?
You know, this is a question that a lot of people have. A psychiatrist is someone who has taken medical education, which means he has studied MBBS first and then gone on to study, psychiatry. They are legally authorized to give you certain medications that you may require in your journey towards become mentally and emotionally better. Whereas a psychologist or a psychotherapist is not entitled to give you any medication. They help you through the journey, through the process, like I mentioned, and I'm putting it as simply as possible so people understand. There's no pill that can take your pain away. It's not emotional pain away. It is something that you need to work through, and a therapist is going to help you in the process by giving you certain tools, techniques. It can be cognitive behavioral therapy, it can be hypnotherapy, it can be anything, right, that will help you through your journey in making you um, be able to deal with life and its challenges in the best possible way. And I would also like to highlight here, some people have, a lot of times, a lot of people do shame people who take psychiatric medicines. However, that is something that needs to be stopped. Yes, you can, if you there are alternative ways today, and I truly believe in that, working on your nutrition, working with, multiple different things. But if you have come to a stage where you do need a little bit of medical regulation, please go ahead and take it.
Very well explained. Now, I want to touch upon something which you said earlier. You referred to Asian women, right? You referred to something which is subconsciously into our system, something the way we have been brought up, the way generationally we have been programmed. With the breakup of the joint family system, clearly there are more mental health issues now than that they were, 50 or 70 or maybe even 100 years. The breakup of the joint family has clearly led to this becoming almost an epidemic, if you may call it. One, do you agree with this, and how do we resolve this?
I would agree with it if a joint family is a healthy family, right? If it's not a healthy family, then this, and joint family systems are largely in Asian communities, largely in Asian families, where actually, if you go back in time thousands of years ago, you talk about traditional Chinese, things, you talk about Ayurveda, there's a lot of importance on mental health, which involves community and community bonding. See, we are social animals at the end of the day. So we thrive when we are around people. Why has mental health become such a big issue in the pandemic? Because we are cut off. However, for some people, as I said, it's only going to be beneficial if everyone, I would say on the same page, but if everyone knows or makes an effort to regulate their own emotional damage and not project their insecurities and their issues onto the other person. Only then it's going to be helpful. And today also, a lot of senior citizens who have grandchildren are choosing not to, live in that joint family system because they feel like they have lived a difficult life. They struggled a lot. Now they may not have the emotional and physical bandwidth to deal with grandchildren and handling grandchildren when they're already dealing with certain lifestyle diseases themselves. So I think it's very, very subjective. I do believe it's helpful, but at the same time, it it needs to be taken from person to person.
Clearly, in the joint family, at least earlier on, women could speak to other women, people with experience, people who have gone through these things before, and somehow sit and work out. The problem is in today's situation, small houses, small families, you don't have somebody to speak to.
Absolutely.
It's just the four walls you can speak to.
Because there's
Yeah,
no outlet,
yeah,
right? One person, let's say, if two women had a good equation, they would stand up for each other, they would speak for each other, they would allow them that, that ventilation aspect which does not exist today. And also, with whatever modernization, the growth in technology and all of that we have gone through, it has made us more disconnected. It has made us to
yes,
lean toward instant gratification. In
yeah.
fact, one of the key things I ask people to do when they come into therapy with me, stop using social media, please. Or if you today digital marketing professionals struggle a lot with mental health issues because their work is online. So are you giving yourself that certain amount of time of not looking for validation outside and actually looking internally?
Yeah.
Right? So, however, again, it's a choice. And again, all of these addictions come back to us escaping our own realities because we don't know how to deal with them anymore. And even if we've dealt with it, we don't know how to, reframe it and put it into action.
Yeah, you spoke about the digital media thing. I can actually share. I have a friend who works in media, and she was responsible for those late night serials, the 11 o'clock, the horror, the crime, and rape, and all those serials. After 2 years, she finally resigned and came and sat at home. She said, my whole time goes about thinking of these scenarios, all these dark scenarios in these serials which are happening. She said it was affecting my mind. I've stopped working. I
You
need time out.
you check Netflix today. So many series are dark. Yes, content we consume does rewire our brain. So, are you choosing content that is going to help you feel better? If not, then unfollow those accounts, mute those accounts if they are people close to you, and choose not to engage in that activity because you have to deal. Your mental health sometimes becomes your responsibility.
Yeah,
Also, I think, with the age that we are living in, we have desperately started running behind success and money. We want to skip the process, and that is why my generation is very, very unwell. I think because of the amount of pressure that we have chosen to put on ourselves, and probably because people around us are also doing that way, or people are sharing their half realities and half truths on social media. We end up
yeah,
comparing ourselves. The
yes.
biggest pandemic I feel we deal with is not feeling good enough. And I think no one better than you to understand this and know this. Success is a compounding, it takes compounding for success to happen. It's not
Yeah,
one day.
yeah,
Mental
yeah,
health is just like compounding what you speak about, Deepalji.
yeah.
Exactly that way.
So a lot of you may not know. I always tease Ishita. I tell her that she's the one who eats dokla dipped in sambar. So
So,
she has a Gujarati mother and a Tamilian father.
and getting married
Tell
to
us,
a Malayali.
getting married to a Malayali. Classic example of a complete hybrid. So tell us the experience of growing up in a mixed marriage, in a father who is from one part of India, and mother who is from another part of India. Both have their own customs, traditions, things they don't do and things they won't do, things they won't touch, they won't eat.
Absolutely.
How was it growing up?
So, I would like to add here, my dad was Tamil, my mom was Gujarati, my mom is Gujarati. I was born in India, brought up in three different countries, namely Muscat, Zimbabwe, and Zambia. Both had lifestyles of their own. My dad was a typical time ram. He would wake up at 5 in the morning. 4:35 in the Brahma Muhurat. By the time we wake up, like partially the day is finished. My mother, on the other hand, is a chilled out Gujarati person. You've met her, you know how she is. Very chilled out with life. Sometimes this is what my mentor told me. A lot of times, what happens is the very thing that attracts us to a partner becomes a source of conflict later on if it is not dealt with. So in some situations, it was fun because I learned how to respect cultures. I learned how to respect differences. I learned how to deal with different communities in different ways. However, it was difficult when they started having differences within themselves because I didn't know what was right and wrong. But I think I was blessed at that point because that was when my journey into spirituality began. I started meditating at the age of 8. That held ground for me. And now that I'm getting married to a Malayali, I'm seeing, I feel like I'm seeing the definition of a very healthy family in that. A healthy modern family that allows each other to be themselves, that we don't conform to certain norms such as mother-in-law and daughter-in-law do not share a good relationship. I feel like I share a better relationship with my mother-in-law than I do with my mother. It's Surat sometimes just sleeps off because we're constantly talking. So I think what I took from my family, I consciously chose to not to carry it forward. And the biggest, I keep saying this, the biggest result, or biggest realization for me was when I realized that I had broken my own emotional addictions, was when I got into a relationship that was healthy. I was used to dealing with unhealthy relationships, and I saw that happening in multiple relationships. So it's possible. And however, to if you're belonging to an intercaste community, and it can get difficult for a lot of people. I know it's very difficult. Learn to respect yourself first, and then try and respect the other person's point of view. This is my takeaway from, I think, what my parents could have done better.
So, having been exposed to different communities, different customs, different traditions is actually positive for you going ahead. You've seen there, you've been there, done that. You know how to take something out, how to mix it together so that you get a nice, tasty bhel puri.
So, again, I realize that, you do need to be serious, but at the same time, you do need to have fun as well. You
Yeah.
don't necessarily need to, and this is something my mom always believes, everything does not need to be made into a serious conversation.
Yeah.
Majani, like, you should have fun. That's what my mom taught me. But lifestyle and getting serious about your lifestyle, I took from my dad. That was
Yeah.
necessary.
Yeah.
So, balance.
So I don't know whether you're comfortable sharing this, and since Ishita is a dear friend, I know a few things about her, and since we are talking about this topic, there was a time when you had serious issues with your body, with your health. You needed to undergo surgery, and somehow you overcame it mentally with your emotional well-being, with your background in psychotherapy, in helping other people deal with their issues. If you are okay, you could share with the audience how you did it and how did it work.
Deepak ji is aware of that journey. What I have not shared, and I would like to share on this platform very openly, because this is a new thing that has happened. I was diagnosed with fibroids last year. And for me, that came as a shock because I felt like I had worked on myself emotionally. I had done a lot of work on myself. How can this happen to me? That was the first thing that went through my mind. Um, that's when I realized that step one, and this is something I did while I was reeling in and out of hospital. And when I say reeling in and out, I was admitted 14 times in a span of 5 years. And most of them were psychosomatic. I have been very blessed that I have an amazing, amazing support from, various kinds of doctors, and doctors of all kinds, right? From allopaths to, homeopaths, you name it. And I think that really helped me. And my surgeon actually made me realize that it has to start from you. You cannot let unprocessed emotions sit in your body because 7 years later, it is going to manifest as some, um, you know, um, some disorder or some disease. This is what people say. And it takes about 7 years for a physical disease to manifest it. Now, coming back to this fibroid journey, I was recently able to reverse the condition in 3 months. Um, what I sat with myself was not shaming myself and actually understanding where it came from. And I'll tell you something very explicitly, and I think you know this about me. I've not been too fond of children. Now, maybe it could, I felt maybe it could be from, a childhood that I felt that my needs were not met. And that's why, I kept telling this to myself. I'm not fond of children. I don't want to have, a child. This is something I'm not comfortable with. I don't think I have motherly instincts. Even though I was practicing, and I'm being very open here, I kept saying this to myself because I kept saying I'm scared of that response. And look at where it manifested in the uterus, which holds a child, right? I worked on myself for a good 3 to 4 months. Of course, I changed my nutrition. I went off dairy. I went off wheat. I worked on my insulin resistance. I started exercising. I started taking acupuncture. I did a lot of various different things because my doctor told me. I asked him, "Do I need to go through surgery? What do I need to do?" He said, "Don't worry. You just continue doing what you do. You know what." I forgave myself. I forgave my parents. And I'm not just saying I forgive you. I did it on a very deep level. I tried to balance out the unfulfilled needs that probably I had from my mother, where I did not feel nurtured enough by her. Because as a child, I was the older one. I was touted as the more responsible, and I got tired of it at a certain point, right? While I started working on it, my menstrual cycle started changing. A lifetime of painful menstrual cycle changed completely. I started enjoying the process, and I will be, going for a sonography once again. I had put on a lot of weight last year, and I didn't know how that happened, right? And I knew it was emotional weight. I knew it was some imbalance. So when I sat down with myself, without shaming myself, I recognized it, I resolved it, and I released it. I was able to overcome it with a lot of ease and grace. However, this does not mean that if you need medical help, you should start doing all of this on your own. I took a mix of all, and then I was able to.
It takes guts to share your story and your experience. And as she said, the gut is directly connected with the brain, with the mind, and that is how the body will manifest all these problems. One more question. Can therapy become addictive?
It can. It can. Absolutely can. And not just therapy, going from one seminar to another, spirituality is also a big addiction today. See, what is addiction? As I mentioned, addiction is, in a simple way, just an escape from a reality. You find so many people going from one course to another, but they apply nothing. Not because they don't want to, but they are scared of what will come up. They are probably scared that they will have to deal with certain things that they've not dealt with before, which means that they will have to change, and change sometimes feels scary because we have an identity attached to who we were.
Yeah.
However, if you want to overcome anything, the only way out is through therapy. Most of the healing, most of the transformation happens outside of therapy. Therapy is just going to be that 1.5 hours or 1 hour. Your seminars, will be a few days. After that, you're on your own, and you have to deal with it. There is no escape. There is no blame that happens. As I said, what may have happened with you may not be your fault, but how overcoming it, choosing to overcome it at your own pace, there's no hurry here, is completely your choice. And as we've heard in a lot of success jam events, the environment is always going to be more powerful than your willpower. It will fizzle out. So if and this is something a therapist I speak to, when I speak to my clients, I also talk about a session of closure, and I tell them about it from day one, that you don't need to be in therapy forever. You're not something broken that needs to be fixed. I will assist you with certain tools and techniques that you can use on your own, so that in future, if you are faced with certain issues, you have the wisdom to deal with it. That does not mean you should not take professional help. If you need therapy, yes, seek it. You don't necessarily need to have something wrong with you to seek therapy. And there are times when clients call me and speak to me because nothing is wrong in their lives. They just want to upgrade themselves and feel better. Like an app, you keep upgrading your apps, right?
Yes.
Just the same way. However, if you feel like you are becoming addicted to your therapist, or you're becoming attached to your therapist, please bring it out. Your therapist will be able to help you through it, provided the therapist is aware that they do not need to fulfill their needs through the client. Boundaries are very, very important here. Very, very important for both the therapist and both the client. And this needs a session of its own where you're educated on the importance of boundaries.
And I just want to take forward what you said just now. Life of a therapist, of a person who's constantly listening to problems of others, always giving them solutions. At what point does a therapist need therapy? Or is it part of the job? It comes with it.
See, it does, and I will be again very honest, it sometimes does pull you down, because everywhere you go, there are times when you don't realize that, you realize that you can't have a normal conversation anymore.
Yes.
People are constantly speaking about therapy. And what you also end up sometimes doing is therapizing every situation in your life, every relationship in your life. It becomes difficult. You need to accept your limitations as a therapist and as a human being as well. There are cases sometimes that I don't know how to deal with, or I'm not an expert in. For example, children. Please be humble enough and say that, what, I would like to pass this on to someone I know, or pass it on to a colleague, because I have reached a stage where this is what I can do. I'm not leaving you alone, but this is my limitation. It is, you know, therapists in this pandemic have dealt with the same situations that a non-therapist has. Even though they may have tools, even though they may have techniques, it may not, it has taken them a lot of issues to also, deal with what you're dealing with together with what they're dealing with. Right? I remember there was a COVID patient in my house, and I had to deal with a few cases because they were as important. What this does is, it for a lot of doctors, for a lot of therapists, they reach a stage or a condition known as compassion fatigue. You're just tired of being compassionate. And so it's very important for a therapist guilt free to take breaks emotionally, mentally, physically, do activities that do not necessarily move around therapy or self help books or self help webinars. And this is something that, I think a lot of people, including me, have ended up doing. Mental health does not always mean therapy. It does not always mean you talk about mental health all the time in order to get better. You can, for me, a good way to de stress, like I've said, is playing with my dog or watching dog videos, right? For someone else, it can be playing cricket. I am taking a new hobby. I'm actually I've signed up to learn Korean as a language. This is what I want to do to keep myself a little more emotionally healthy, because I'm constantly talking about that. And therapists are not gods. Therapists, or even a spiritual healer, is not someone who will just do this and everything will be gone, right? That also means that a therapist needs a therapist. You need a mentor or someone who is on the same journey or on the same path as you, who can either kick you out of your comfort zone or can show you the mirror without being judgmental, that, hey, you know what, it's okay to feel this way. Maybe you need to remind yourself of this, but that does not mean you're a bad therapist. because therapists today deal with a lot of imposter syndrome as well. They just don't feel good enough sometimes. And in a country like India, most therapists are underpaid because there's no awareness. And so, there are multiple things that a therapist also deals with, including some coming from dysfunctional families themselves. A therapist, a trainer, a mentor, a coach does not mean that they have a perfect life. And that's why I believe in sometimes, not all the time, sometimes sharing my own imperfections with my clients so that they don't try to struggle to reach a stage of perfection which does not exist. It's okay not to be perfect. You're human and it's okay to be.
We've called this June series the Jewels of June. And Ishita has been the crown jewel of this June programs. We've had really, really very, very powerful celebrities and experts who've been part of the Bloom platform right throughout June, all the 4 Sundays. But this Sunday, this program, this conversation has really been right at the top, jewel in the crown. Before I hand it over to Prem Raj, Payal has two announcements to make. We have two forthcoming upcoming programs. She would like all of us to know that, and then Prem Raj can go for the closing. In the meantime, if anybody has a question, if they want to ask Ishita, please unmute yourself and ask.
Namaste everyone. We are having a session today, panel discussion on Resilience Sutra, where Deepak Khemani, a co-founder of Bloom, so he will be a host, and we have a speakers, a panelist who will discuss how resilience is important today, and we also have another session, a free webinar by financial master Deepak Khemani sir, who will let us know what is financial quotient this Wednesday. So kindly register. I've already put the registration details and link in the chat box. And do connect us at info@bloomworld.com. And thank you everyone, beautiful audiences, for being here to witness our last jewel of June, Ishita Iyer, today on this beautiful Sunday afternoon. Have a great day ahead. Over to you.
Premraj, Premraj, there is a question from Amit Kothari. You could read that and then you could do the closing. So let me do that. I'll read it out. Ishita, there is a question from Amit. He says or he asks, how is child psychology different and how to deal with children to help them at the early stage to help them become more confident?
All right. So again, I'll keep it very simple here. See, child psychologists actually do their masters in that. They specify, or uh, they pour the entire attention on only that field. Like we have many branches of psychology, such as child clinical. You have forensic. So simply put, child psychology refers to a treatment of a wide range of issues and disorders that affect children and their families. And these are psychologists who work primarily with children, administer some certain tests, conduct research, and also engage in therapy sessions sometimes with the child, the families, and groups. And again, if I'm vulnerable enough here, experience with a psychologist was at the age of 11. Also, there's something that I have seen in certain children who seem to be dealing with basic things like anxiety and probably something like depression, which makes me bring out the point that clinical depression is something that can set in a child by the age of 5 as well. It's not something that only plagues adults. A child, I think, maybe who's dealing with certain, certain, let's say, emotional and mental issues on a basic level. If I get a case like that, I actually work with the parents because the trigger is coming from them. The child is responding to what is happening. Right. So let's say, for example, there's a case that I recently worked on in the US. this person, the parents didn't have a great relationship, and the father used to try to teach a lesson to the child by dipping him in water. What this ended up doing for the child was he started troubling other children in school, and he started holding them like that, exactly the way the father was. So then, the teachers try to understand, what is happening, why is this like this, or, the parents then don't realize that, one thing that could have gone wrong could have led to, something like this. So if, when it comes to dealing with children, and I'm not an expert when it comes to dealing with children, I will always work with the parent first before I start working with the child. And one small example, if you give me the time and space for that, there was a 3-year-old girl that the mother called me, to say that she's had a cataract surgery and she's not opening her eyes at all. Cataract in both eyes. And the doctor said that she's absolutely fine. There's absolutely no physical issue. But the child was throwing a tantrum of not opening the eyes just because she wanted that attention, because both the parents were working. I spent 2 sessions only working with the mother. The mother kept saying, I'm not able to see this person, I'm not able to see this person. And, when the mother was pregnant with the child, she kept saying, I lost my mamaji, I could not see him die. So everything, if you see, was associated with fight. Her mother working on her, the way she was speaking to the child, the way she was dealing with the child opened her eyes in the second session 2 hours after I left. And I didn't work with the child at all. So sometimes certain behaviors, certain, unconscious and conscious behaviors are things that children really pick up, especially between the ages of 0 to 8, because they don't have something known as the critical filter of judgment that separates the conscious and the subconscious. I hope that answers the question, at least partially.
Yes.
Premraj.
Thank you, all the participants who have stayed till the very end. We appreciate it. And Ishita, thank you for sharing your profound wisdom. You are leaving us with a lot of room for introspection in our lives. Post this session, we will have a better understanding of our lives and how to go about being more contented to spread cheer all around. We are privileged to have you on our platform and look more association with you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for having me. As I said, it just feels like home. And I hope it helped at least one person, and lots of love to all of you. Thank you so much.